vested interest. I'm a driver, and I'm currently heading towards 70. No, Mike, don't say that. No, I will get on my ears. So I worry about these things as well. Well, you rightly said that driving is it's a very fundamental thing. It's almost a human rights thing about access to mobility. And whereas we're lucky here in Berlin, you have one bus service and trams and so on. If you live down to Hereford, there isn't much, and you need your traffic, you need your car to be able to get around. I'm going to go through a number of issues which I hope will address some of the concerns you have about what on earth we get up to and what it is I do. I'm not a government employee. I don't get paid for any of the stuff that I do. I don't even get a decent lunch out of it. It's mostly sandwiches. I chair a panel which is convened by the Minister to advise the Department of Transport and the DVLA about medical conditions which may impact on driving. And I recruit into that experts and various other people, statisticians, a whole lot of other team. The team is about 24 of us who sit around and discuss particular cases and try and set up policies for what we're doing. And I'll give you a bit more background to how all that works. The DVLA is a separate organisation which provides the whole business to do with the licensing process, guided by rules and regulations which come from the Department for Transport. Our panel advises the DVLA and is convened by the Department for Transport to do all this. So, to my surprise, there are large numbers of people driving cars in the UK. Of course, you might not feel like it when you live in Hereford, but it certainly feels like it if you're trying to get home in Birmingham. There are almost as many driving licence holders as there are vehicles now. Of course, not everybody's out on the road at the same time, thankfully. But you can see that the problem of administering and handling this vast group of people is really quite a taxing process. And the DVLA is currently going through what we might call seismic upheavals in trying to upgrade all its IT to deal with huge numbers, and this is leading to a number of problems. And the problem isn't getting any smaller. In fact, horrifically, more people are passing their driving test today than were passing a few years ago. Expect to see yet more congestion as time goes on. I thought when my daughter said she was going to take her driving test, I thought, good, one less person who will be driving on the road, because I didn't think she'd ever anticipate anything happening. But in fact, she's just passed. So that's frightened me even more. This is a real serious bit, of course. This is about injury from road traffic accidents. And we have to remember there are those in their vehicles who get injured, and also particularly there are those pedestrians who get injured as well. The figures have stayed rather constant and indeed seem to be improving up to a point, and now they're slowly getting a bit worse. What are the reasons for that? Well, one of the reasons is lack of expenditure on safety on the roads. So government expenditure to local councils such as Birmingham is reduced, so their capacity to be able to put the roads right has got worse. The other reasons are probably due to the sheer numbers out there and also lack of enforcement and a number of other factors. Actually, it's interesting, if you wanted to design a car that kept you as safe as possible, you would make it out of balsa wood and you have a dagger pointed at your chest in the middle of the steering wheel. And this would make you drive extremely safely and there would be no deaths on the road. However, even Volvo don't think that's a cool idea. So here we go. So now this is where we get to perhaps a little bit of idea. So, you might ask, and you might sensibly ask, I've got a patient, he's very well, he's had his tumour out, he's fine, what are his risks of having a seizure? He doesn't seem to have any problems. And you might think that, oh well, out there somewhere is some linkage between major road traffic accidents and fatalities and illness and accidents. And the police collect this data and somehow it goes into some central database and I can look at it and I can say, oh, this is good, we've introduced this policy and all these people have stopped having accidents. It's not like that at all, I'm afraid. We have no idea of the direct linkage between accidents and medical conditions. However, in the last set of data, this is 2016-2017, when they started to look at what are the 10 most common causes of traffic accidents, You can look at all of these items and say, oh, well, I've done that once or twice, and oh dear, I walked off the pavement just recently without really looking. So you can see these are all things which normal people do, let alone having medical conditions. But if you have a medical condition, maybe you're slightly more susceptible to almost all of these things occurring. If you then drill down into some of the detail and look at impairment or distraction, forget distraction for a moment, look at impairment, and I've marked them off here. Fatigue, that can occur for a number of different reasons, of course. Illness or disability, mental or physical. Impairment by drugs. Bear in mind there are a huge number of patients, particularly as you get older, are on more and more drugs. You can think a little bit about how these things may impact. And a recent study we did, which cost an enormous amount of time to do, we reckon that probably around about 10% of road traffic accidents are directly related to medical conditions, and possibly 5 to 10% may be associated with sort of other conditions which impact on that. For example, as you'll see as I'll show you later, the idea of accumulation of comorbidity-related risk as you get older may well be one of the issues here. So if you were to say to me, what's the relationship between a medical problem and accidents on the road, I would give you a figure of around about 15% of them have some medical condition associated with it. And as there are more older people on the road, that figure, unfortunately, it will probably get a little bit larger. So we're obliged to have some kind of policy, some kind of thinking about who and who should not be driving if they have a medical condition. And just out of interest, just to give you an idea of where we're coming from when we start to look at risk, we're looking at who gets hurt and what that kind of impact has. So at the moment we haven't got any particular restrictions on cycles, but we do on motorcycles, cars and light goods vehicles. We make a differentiation into heavy goods vehicles, so-called Group 2, because for every one driver who might get injured by that, they take out 8 others. So you can see that a big vehicle that is likely to cause more harm is a much more serious issue, and we need to think a little bit about it. And that becomes even more relevant when you think that someone who drives a heavy goods vehicle will be doing considerably more mileage a year, and as it's a vocational activity, they'll actually be sitting in that vehicle for maybe 36, 38 hours a week, by comparison with your 9.7 minutes each way to work, or whatever it happens to be. So you can see there's quite a difference in terms of what the longitudinal risk may be. Interestingly enough, the number of heavy goods vehicles on the roads is actually dropping, and there are more of these things called white van man around, and that's probably due to Amazon and all the rest of it. But these are increasingly a problem, which I can tell you some stories about later on. But actually, this is a changing pattern of use of the roads, and it is causing us some particular issues. So the licensing issues we have to deal with. So crash risks are highest in new young male drivers, that's well known, and it's a small increase later in life. That's as we get towards 70 plus. Driving brings mobility benefits to all, especially to those with disabilities for old people. Yes, absolutely right, it's about being able to get around. We as doctors need to make sure that we talk to patients about all of this, and when we're talking about the standards which we have, they're based on evidence, quite a bit of it, a lot of data, not much of it that can be interpreted as evidence, and a fair bit of expert opinion. And, what's importantly, now 27 years use of regulations to try and understand how they impact on driving. So there is that battery of information as well. As yet, as I said, there's no direct linkage to those conditions. So let's just quickly go through some of these issues to give you an idea of how we break things down. So the medical standards referred to are Group 1 and Group 2 licence holders. If you look at your licence, you'll get you all to pick up your licence and to show off where it is. But anyway, on the back of it will tell you what groups you are. And Group 1 is mostly motor cars and motorcycles. Group 2 is larger lorries over 7.5 tonnes, 3.5 tonnes rather. So the medical standards for Group 2 drivers are very much higher than Group 1 for the reasons that I've said. You can do far more damage with a big vehicle. And we also have issues related to age. I know age is not something you should really talk about, because there's some young 60-year-olds like myself, and some older 60-year-olds who would struggle with that. But look, what we do know is that our reserve and our capacity physiologically, our capacity to stand on one leg, for example, as you get older, is a very good test of what your physical ability is like. We accumulate this. And also, for every year, 10 years of life, we seem to accumulate more comorbidities. And if you think of the medical conditions as defined, if you're starting to accumulate comorbidities, there is a risk profile for each of those comorbidities. And as yet, there's no clever maths available that enable us to integrate that information perfectly, so we get a reasonable estimate of what the risk may be for your heart disease, diabetes, and previous head injury, all occurring in the same year or prior to the year you want to be licensed. So these are some quite difficult issues we actually have to deal with. So Group 1 licenses are normally issued valid until the age of 70 years, a so-called till 70 license, unless restricted to a shorter duration for medical reasons. There's no upper limit after age 70, and a renewal is necessary every 3 years. Now, as you know, there's a lot of excitement just recently. Why don't we push it up to 75 years old? And I was a tall man. Why don't we take it up to 75? And there is actually, when you look into it, some interesting data about IQ changes over the population that were born 65 years ago and those who were born 45 years ago as to what they may be like now. So theoretically, if you were born only 45 years ago, hit my age, as it were, you're likely to be slightly more intelligent than I am, just by drift of the population and so on. So it could argue that 75, you may actually be functioning better, and because your intrinsic health state may be better, and there may be a way of measuring that, might allow us to go to 75. But actually, the data is not that good at the moment, and it's not a situation we really want to change. And we'd like to have some hard data. But from the DVLA point of view, ooh, that'd be good. There'd be a few 100,000 less people waiting for information if we could do that. So I have a lot of pressure on me to say, change the registration because we think it would be easier, as opposed to changing because there's any evidence. So there are issues we have to deal with that. Oops, go back one. So, as I said, there's no upper age limit, and you can carry on driving. And indeed, this is old-fashioned now. There are about 140 drivers now, over the age of 100, still driving. I don't know if they've got their dogs with them or not. But this is true. And you might be absolutely horrified by this. But actually, 2 of them came to meet me at the DVLA for us to give them a present from the Institute of Advanced Measures. Very complicated sort of award that we gave them, and they were, I have to say, they were considerably sprightly. One actually cycled from the station to be there. So, I mean, it's just crazy, really. So, all licensed applicants require medical self-declaration by the applicant. We all know that anyway for when you actually apply. So, these are issues that we have to deal with the Group 1. Group 2 is something we take much more seriously. So, I don't think you can imagine how I think about this. I think Group 1, why can't they drive? We've got to think of reasons why, you actually got to have a bloody good reason to stop people from driving. You'll see why, because we've set the risk level quite high, quite low for these patients, for people to be able to drive. Conversely, if I put you in a heavy goods vehicle and make you drive 38 hours a week, you are potentially very much more dangerous. So we have to be much more risk averse in the way we handle this particular group. So we can issue it at 21 years. You have to be 21 years old to hold just a straight license. You can do it at 18, but you have to sit an extra exam before you can then sit the final one. And you're valid till the age of 45, and then subsequently you're assessed on a regular basis. This might seem a little bit strange and a bit harsh, but there's a high proportion of men involved in this process who have other medical problems or seem to accumulate medical problems due to overweight, fatigue issues, back problems and so on. And consequently, when we tried to look at this in more detail, this group kept falling out as being a group we really need to keep an eye on from the point of view of licensing. From age 65 to age, Group 2 licenses are renewable annually without an upper age limit. In fact, there are very few people over the age of 65 driving heavy goods vehicles around, very few indeed. All Group 2 licence applicants must be accompanied by a completed medical applicant form D4. This means that they have to be seen and assessed by someone who is competent to do that particular problem that they've got, as it or any specialist things that they've got. So the driving rule, in the interest of road safety, those who suffer from a medical condition likely to cause a sudden disabling event at the wheel, or who are unable to safely control their vehicle from any other cause should not drive. Now, to put that in perspective, you are driving down the motorway, it's the end of the weekend, 70 miles an hour, humming back home, nice cup of tea, all ready to brew, it's dark, it's raining, and you just have a momentary lapse, you know, just your eyes closed for a second. Whose hands up who that may have happened to? Okay, so it doesn't take long to cause a major accident, and so if you imagine you have a seizure lasting 15 seconds of absence on the motorway, that can be very serious indeed. So that's the basis on which we think about what we're doing. We've got to be very careful about what's actually going on when medical conditions come up. So, and I've just listed some of the many questions that I'm going to try and sort of cover very briefly that people get worried about and how they deal with it. So what we're really interested in are conditions like what we call sudden disabling events, and that's sort of number one on our list. There's another situation which is what you might call developing conditions, i.e. someone at risk in the next year of developing a condition which is likely to cause a sudden disabling event, and we deal with that very slightly differently. For these groups, brain surgery, head injuries, brain tumours, cranial or brain irradiation, we have some very good figures about what the risks are of seizures occurring in the year after. So when we think about it, when you apply, it doesn't matter if you're in your first year after having had your surgery or 2 years later, we have conditional probability curves for being able to calculate what your risk is of having a seizure in the next year. That's what we do. It's not what your risk is overall, you know, over 10 years or something like that. It's in the next year. That's what we're after, so-called conditional probability. And I'll try and show you just a little bit about that if I've got a moment. So most of our problems to do with these are actually not neurological. If you look at this great long list of sudden disabling events, most of these are actually cardiac related. So you can imagine I have to spend quite a lot of time discussing with the cardiac team whether vasovagal attacks should be dealt with by me and my group, or they should be dealt with by the cardiac team. And we go backwards and forwards. And indeed, they can produce some interesting discussions about what goes forward. For example, just recently, some of you may know about the Glasgow bin lorry man. Okay, so this is an interesting situation in which the patient, the guy, was told to tell the DVLA that he had had vasovagal attacks. And what was remarkable about it is that he had told the doctor that these vasovagal attacks, whilst he was sitting down, unusual, most vasovagal attacks occur when you stand up or you're in the upright position. So as a result of all of this, two things occurred. One is the DVLA were not to blame, really, because nobody told them anything about it, and why change the regulations? If only they did what they're supposed to do, we could have done it. But nonetheless, the DVLA felt so threatened by this that we were forced to relook at all of this, and you'll now see that if you're sitting and you have a vasovagal attack, and you drive a heavy goods vehicle, you're automatically banned from driving until it's sorted out. So things have occurred to try and put these things right. Whether that's the right way in which policy should be formed, I don't really know, but we can discuss it if you want. So the important thing, and this is probably the most important, you can all sort of nod off after this, because most of what I'm going to say is included in this slide, really, is we used to work by a thing called at a glance, and those with beards and sort of been around a long time, they'll say, oh, just looking at a glance, it can tell you. Actually, at a glance is gone now. It's not there anymore. It's been replaced by this new document, all shiny new document with colour bits here and nice tables and this, that, and the other. It's almost as incomprehensible as the previous one, but it's just slightly better English and it's a bit more consistent. It's called Assessing Fitness to Drive, AFT, a guide for medical professionals. Now, the reason why I draw your attention to it is because when patients and you go to the DVLA website to find information, you will find that there are two sets of ways of going at this. One is you will see a thing called A to Z Guide to Illness. And you say, oh, I'll look at brain tumours. And look at, don't go there for the moment. Don't go there for the moment, because it's 2 years out of date, it's wrong, and some of the interpretation of at a glance that they converted onto that is actually in the wrong section. So don't use that, please, because it's caused all sorts of problems. Please only use this, and even, you can even draw your patient's attention to it. It's freely accessible. You go to Google, you put DVLA Assessing Fitness to Drive, you'll get to the website, you can download it, and you can read it. I like to think it's in English. It's a bit of Australian in there and a little bit of Canadian, but basically speaking, it's in English, and you can look up your condition and you can see what's going on, what the actual. And I'm very happy for people to see it and for doctors to show it to patients. It's very important. In fact, this is a really crucial issue to do with how GPs react when they're asked about this. I'll cover this because I think it's a very important issue. So that's the document you need to access and tell your patients about and work from. And if only the doctors knew this, we'd be laughing. So here we are. So the old A to Z of conditions is unreliable. It's there. Someone's written out in bold capitals there. At a glance is now been updated and gone, and this is the standard. This assessing fitness to drive is now the standard. And this is, by the way, is updated twice a year. Twice a year. So I sit down and I work through it after each meeting, and we upgrade the regulations twice a year now. And we're very hard at work at looking at anaplastic oligodendroglial tumours, we're looking at cavernomas, we're looking at a new category of stroke problem related to subarachnoid hemorrhage in elderly patients which masquerade as stroke, and so on. So there's some various things that we're doing to upload. So when you go into it, there's this nice brightly coloured thing which shows you the main disorders, and then you go into neurological disorders in reasonable English. You can find out where the bit that you want and then go and have a look at the standard that we've arrived at. So it's a very straightforward process to look at it. Now this is the important bit. The DVLA has the power to withdraw a driving licence, and I have to say the first time I heard we've ever been involved in doing this was actually 2 years ago, and it took a lot of hearts wrenching by everybody to get involved with this, but actually to formally withdraw a licence as a legal thing going through the courts. In fact, that doesn't normally happen, and all that happens is that it's your insurance company say you can't drive because you're not insured. So it's an issue that's important, but they have the legal power to withdraw your driving licence. Now, it's your duty, as if you are told by your doctor, to notify the DVLA, not the doctor's responsibility. It's not the doctor's responsibility. And people might say, well, why not? Why don't we get these GPs to do something? I mean, they're just doing nothing these days. So why don't we get them to actually part it? Now, there's a very interesting problem here, and I'm interested to hear your comments on it, and I share it with you because I think it will come up this year, and it certainly will come up if these people get back in again. So it's about this issue to do with what is your GP to you. Okay? Now, the role of the GP is changing. And nobody, I think, would argue about that. And in principle, the GP is your, your confidant, your supporter. He or she's there to provide an advocate role for your accessing medical care and whatever support that you need. It's bad enough in a way that they control budgets, because in principle they could control your access to treatment. I think it would be even worse if we said to them that they automatically have to notify the DVLA of a medical condition. So, because that would mean that they are the ones who would stop you from driving. Do you see what I'm getting at? It's quite nice that there is a buffer. In fact, it's quite nice that there's us lot around to be blamed for all the problems that are occurring at the moment to do with delays and all the rest of it. And I don't mind. I've got broad shoulders and I've got a wife who beats me regularly. So I can put up with all of that. And I think it's important because if we can protect this role for GPs for a little bit longer. Now, there's increasing pressure from the Lords now to make doctors responsible for reporting, and I'm not keen on that. However, there are issues where this is a problem. So a doctor should be asked for an opinion about a patient's fitness to explain the likely outcome, and they would reference that. So we'd expect a doctor who didn't quite know to access that book, look it up and say, according to this, you should or should not be driving, or you may be able to drive at such and such a point. If there's any doubt about it, there is a direct access for them to be able to get some help and advice for it. I talked about bin lorry men, that'll do them out. So this is important. If you do not manage, this is to the doctor, okay, this is to the doctor, if you do not manage to persuade a patient to stop driving where this is indicated, or you are given find evidence that the patient is continuing to drive contrary to advice, you should disclose relevant medical information immediately in confidence to the medical advisor at the DVLA. Before giving information to the DVLA, you should inform the patient of your decision to do so. You're going driving, Mr. Jones, you shouldn't be, you're at risk, I'm going to tell the DVLA. Once the DVLA has been informed, you should also write to the patient to confirm this. I tend to do the same, I advise people to do the same thing at the same time. So, see the patient, tell them you're going to do it, and then do it. Now this is important because we've got a few people around who are completely bonkers, and we need to make sure they actually are not driving. So that's the law, that's the legal framework in which we have to work. We have the DVLA neurological panel, which is the panel that I chair, which I've told you about how it's formed. And we also have 24 DVLA medical advisors who reside in Swansea and make decisions on what's actually going to happen to this. And we have a series of computer-based algorithms which are based on the conditions, and we've designed all of these so that if you plug in your forms, your CRAN forms and so on into this, it automatically generates a yes or no or a maybe. And it's the maybes that go to the medical advisors, and they sort them out accordingly as to what they think should happen. And this is the important bit to understand in terms of how we're playing. So we look at the risk of a disabling event occurring whilst at the wheel. And for group 1, the threshold is 20%. So what we're saying is, in the next year, we will tolerate 20 out of 100 having a seizure. Now that's quite lenient, isn't it? Don't you think that's lenient? That's very lenient, I think. And it's based on, I can tell you the structure which it's all based on, but it'll take another hour to explain how we've arrived at that figure. But I think it's quite lenient, and it's based on the fact that these are dynamic curves. So when you're looking even at conditional probability, the pattern is changing all the time. And a period of 3 or 6 months or a year that we work with is really quite a dynamic period. And this average that we take for risk over there to be able to make this work is, I think, very lenient. And it recognises the social necessity of what we're actually dealing with. Group 2, however, the threshold is 2% for heavy goods vehicles, for all the reasons that I've said. If you want to be an airline pilot, the risk is 1%. And that is also a crucial thing, which I can give you another lecture on if you want to hear about it. Very interesting. I sit on the CAA panel as well. So we are dealing with patients who have seizures mostly, and we're looking at about 80 per 100,000 a year. And if you do some sums, that's an awful lot of drivers who may or may not have a seizure in a year. And we have to come up with some sensible rules which allow us to manage this group. Also, we have to find rules which allow people to be put in a, as it were, in purdah for a short time, in the knowledge that they're likely to get better because we know about their medical condition. So we don't want to stop them driving. What we want to do is stop them for a period of time until they're better or they've got over whatever it is, to get them back driving. So there has to be a way for them to get back to driving, as well as for us to control the period of time that they're at highest risk. So this is the sort of thing that you'll see within the new booklet. So we'll have a description of what we're talking about, and then we'll have for group 1 and for group 2. And this format, and they've also put these traffic light things in as well, which are against my advice. I didn't like the traffic lights really, but they're very keen on traffic lights. I think it's easier. I think it just looks like a for sale notice in an artistic gallery. You know, the important thing about it is that it does make it a little easier to try and understand what's going on. And this format is what we've used right the way through the whole process. So the standard normally then is that we would have, for someone who's just a single unprovoked seizure, it's normally about 6 months for them to be off. And that's changed from what it was 3 years ago. It used to be a whole year, now it's 6 months. And there are some logistical reasons why that works out much, much better, and the neurologists are happy with it. Okay, so this is a strange looking graph. This is one that we put in the aeromedicine graph. And what it shows very clearly is what we've done is we've estimated what the risk is after a period of time. So if you go 2 years with a head injury, this is with a head injury, we can use basic information to estimate what your risk is, and then put that point in. So we can say, righto, you're on this line for high risk, and at 2 years your risk has dropped to this point. And then, therefore, your risk in the next year is actually that figure. So we can do sums to work out what your risk is in the next year. And we can see, you can see from this, if we can get you below 20%, we can have you back driving quite quickly. This is great, isn't that easy? Just take each patient, plug them in, and then we'll have them driving in no time. The problem is the population data for most of the groups we look at is what it is, population data. So the grade sports, a large spectrum of patients for which we end up with some finite data, and I don't know where patients sit within that in terms of what's going on. So that makes life very, very difficult. So we look at a whole range of sort of detailed stuff, but this is a group of prospective disabilities. Any medical condition, because of its progressive or intermittent nature, may develop into a prescribed or relevant disability. This is all word speak. What it's really saying is there are two issues: a sudden disabling event or a progressive problem that's like to occur and get worse in the next period of time. And this is where we come on to brain tumours proper. And the two criteria we use are risk of epilepsy in the next year. Okay, and we can work that out from standard curves which we've got, and the risk of progressive morbidity in the next year. And this is what people don't quite get. Okay, so for most glioblastomas, even for most low-grade glial tumours, we don't quite know what they're going to do in the year, but by a year they've sort of sorted themselves out. For the high-grade glial tumours, we know that because of the terrible figures for these group, they're often going to run into problems very quickly. So that's the reason why things are a little bit harsh for that group. We can take Kaplan-Meier graphs for survival figures, or we can take other factors for epilepsy. We can plot the same sorts of graphs, and we can do simple conditional probabilities on that to work out what your risk is going to be in the next year for a particular problem to occur. And that's sort of how we can work out what's going on. And we're open to the idea of new literature helping us decide what those risks are going to be for different conditions. So if you take the head injury one, your average risk of epilepsy after a head injury is 5%. But in the first 6 months after having had your head injury, the risk may be 20, 30, 40, 50%. It's spread over 5 years. So you can then say if it's dropped in the first 6 months or 8 months, in the next year that risk is going to be quite low, or the next 6 months the risk is going to be. So that's how we can work out these particular things quite effectively. So I won't go through this in detail. Actually, you can't read it very well. So what I suggest you is go to the website and have a look. So now this is what it looks like now. So now we've got benign brain tumours, and you see treated by craniotomy, treated by stereotactic radiosurgery, treated by fractionated radiotherapy. Increasingly important now. Remember the new grading? We're now treating more patients more. I've got a real headache now because these are low-grade glial tumours that are now going to have more and more of them are going to have more treatment, and are they going to fall foul of these regulations? So this is another side of, isn't it great we've got new treatments for low-grade glial tumours? This is going to create a number of problems for us, and we're some years behind being able to say, re-alter this to actually say, put a molecular characteristic up front here to try and describe what's going on. So you're going to have to bear with me a bit longer. It's taken that long to get this far, so it'll take a bit longer to get to that point. But it's going to present some real problems, and I'm well aware of that. For malignant brain tumours, again, we've got WHO grade 1 or 2, WHO grade 3, WHO grade 3 or 4. So, for example, in this group, one of the groups that does extraordinarily well are anaplastic oligos. Okay? In fact, if they survive 1 year and we make sure they're not glioblastomas, their chances of having a seizure after the end of 1 year is actually very low. And they're likely to survive well for maybe 5, 7 years without running into any particular problems. At the moment, because they're grade 3, they actually can't drive for 2 years. Whereas potentially we might be able to get them possible to drive at the end of 1 year. And that seems much fairer to me if we can work that one through. I've got to have the data to do it, but what I like to do by telling you that, what I'm trying to reassure is that we are trying to update the information as it becomes more available. So we've got it for supratentorial here and infratentorial tumours. One of the things that people get upset about is why are we stopping infratentorial patients from driving, as it were, with malignant tumours? And the answer is because the high risk of recurrence and the high risk that they may okay, we know their epilepsy risk is low or virtually non-existent. Okay, but they're like to run into a number of other problems. And you'll see this category, all this infratentorial used to be one category. We've now broken it up to try and get it to make more sense for people and a bit more individualised and so on. So don't struggle, Mike, it's all on the website. I can give you a copy of it. Okay, so very quickly, the last couple of minutes. Once your doctor's told you, this is the kind of advice you would give to the patient. So once your doctor's told that you have a brain injury or tumour, brain tumour, you will not be able to die. You must inform the DVLA. The legal obligation of failure to notify the DVLA is a criminal offence and you could be punished by up to $1,000. This is terribly frightening. So if you're told you've got a brain tumour, you've had major surgery, everybody's been terribly nice, and then you go to the website and everybody's going to fine you £1,000 having a brain tumour. This is what some patient wrote to me. And now I'm going to be fined £1,000 for having a brain tumour. So it's not quite what it says. this is a bit harsh, and I don't know anybody's been fined with a brain tumor £1,000 for having one yet. But the important thing is to say that they should, and there's a good reason you should really, because it makes a difference about how you get your licence back at the moment. The sooner you tell the DVLA, the sooner the medical inquiries into your case can start, therein comes the problem. I'm not even going to how difficult doctors can be at filling out the forms and sending them all in, just recognise that it's an effect. You may also find that your insurance cover it is automatically invalid. If we say you can't drive, then your insurance your circumstances change and you can't drive because of your insurance. And then the doctor has a duty to protect your confidentiality, and that goes back to what I was talking to you a bit about before, about the role of your doctor in looking after this. We're applying for a driving licence following a medical. If your licence has been taken or surrendered, then you must reply to the DVLA. So you can check with your doctor at what point the standards will relax and you could possibly get back to it, and you can then reapply. But it's very important to so it's patients. So surrender no. So this is very important. This is very useful for you guys to be able to say this to the patient. If they surrender their licence and send it in, okay. When it comes to the time, if they've had no problems, you can see them getting to the date at which they go. They get them to reapply reasonably 3 months beforehand, send all their bits and pieces in, saying the doctor says I can drive on this as long as I have no further problems. Put that on your form, they should go in. And then if they've held a licence before and surrendered it, once you get the acknowledgement that they've received that document, you will be able to drive, you will be legally able to drive from that date. So once they've acknowledged it on the computer, and you've got that acknowledgement. If, however, you had your licence revoked because you didn't surrender it, you cannot drive until you receive all your things back, including a form from the DVLA saying your licence has been reinstated. Okay? This is so-called Section 88, and actually at the moment it's quite important, because while the DVLA is in a total state of upheaval, then to get people back driving as quickly as possible from when they should, this is very useful advice to be able to hand on to them. So I don't think we want to make that available, but it's just quite important to get that. Why is the DVLA process so slow? There are over 250,000 patients that come under these rules, and around 45,000 of them are currently on short-term licences. And that's not just neuro, that's diabetes, vision, and a lot of other things. The figure is growing by 10% a year as we get accumulating comorbidities with age-related issues, as I've told you. Getting doctors to handle forms quickly, well, that's difficult. Making the regulations as workable as safe and correct. So you can understand that all the time I'm having to alter these to make sense between what's doable and what's safe to be able to get things to work better. Okay, so the most important thing is that we need to encourage our doctors, and I actually am involved with stuff at the GMC at the moment, to make sure all new doctors, all trainee doctors, all medical students going through are trained in this area so that they know what to do, and it's become a priority issue for this next 3 years to actually do that. And I just finished on this by saying this is the document you need to get your hands on. I'm very grateful to my medical group, who are mostly GPs, who are the 24 people who slog their guts out trying to sort out the difficult ones. The medical advisors and the people that sit on my panel to help me make decisions are all voluntary. The doctors that get involved in this, and nowadays increasingly there's a huge amount of work to be able to get this done. So I apologise for the time it's taking, but we are doing our best to try and keep this thing moving. Okay, thank you very much.